Adonai, נביע לצור אישנו, לכו נרננה לאדוני, נביע לצור אישנו, קדימה, לכו נרננה לאדוני, נביע לצור אישנו.
So join me today and let's get started and look at the scriptures through Hebrew lenses. And so let's begin in the book of Leviticus 25:1 through chapter 26 verse 2. So today's teaching is all about the year of the Shemitah and the Jubilee. Now, these are really important concepts in Judaism, and they apply to us today because of the spiritual significance of what this is trying to teach us. So I'm going to be applying it to our lives by the time I finish this today. So I hope you'll stay with me. If it's too long for you, I always say to people, listen to it in 2 30-minute sections, maybe when you're out for a walk. So this is about God's laws and how men are to get along in society. And what is it that they're trusting in while they're living? Are you trusting in man? Are you trusting in yourself? Or are you trusting in the God of Israel? This is what we're going to be looking at today. So Moses is on the mountain of Mount Sinai when these words were given to him. Now, I love the word for mountain in Hebrew. It's har, hey, resh. Behar, on the mountain, is when God spoke to him words for his bride, Israel. God plans for Israel's future. He wanted to give her abundance and blessings in the new homeland. Now, there's a principle here that's important to understand, that blessings and abundance don't come without trials and without trouble. So sometimes people have a misconception. If I follow Jesus, then everything's going to go great. No, he's going to give you what you need during hard times. And boy, could we use this message today, considering what's going on in America right now. So interestingly, there's another word that has that same root as har, mountain, and it means to make pregnant. The word hara. They just added a hey on the end. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Well, remember, we said words that share common letters will have a nuance. So here he is on the mountain with the groom, God, and he's giving a message to the bride. In other words, this same word, pregnant, means I'm saying things to the bride that are going to bring her into the promised land with an abundant life and blessings. And that's where we get the tie to pregnant. Okay, so fruitfulness would require a period of rest for the land. And this is what the Shemitah and the Jubilee is all about. So since the year began on Rosh Hashanah, they were to let it rest every 7th year. So for 6 years, they could plant, they could water, they could plow, they could harvest. But in the 7th year, the land had to rest. Now, I love this because it's the same cycle as the weekday, right? You work for 6 days and then you have a day of resting where you're with your families and you're focusing on the things and the blessings and abundance that God has given you. So it's called the year of the Shemitah. Means to release, to let go, to fall from a height. It also is the 7th year for renewal. Why? Because when things are renewed, then they're more fruitful. I don't know if you've ever had a tree where it bore fruit and then you have somebody come and trim it and dig around the roots and fertilize it and water it. Boy, the next year it's twice as much. So this is what this is about. It's letting the land recover and the Lord to renew all the nutrients of the land. So there's a spiritual principle there for us, isn't it? So after counting these 7 cycles of 7 years, sabbaticals, right, the Shemitah, on the 10th day of the 7th month, which would be the 50th year, this would be a year of freedom called the Jubilee, the year of Jubilee. And it comes from the word Yovel, okay? It means to bring home. So the whole point is the year of Jubilee is that 50th year when all debt is forgiven and people are set free to what? return home. What does returning home mean? Returning home means go back to who you were meant to be in the beginning. That's what it means spiritually, to go home. And so this is what is done in the 50th year. Now, in the month of Tishrei, it's the 10th day of the Yovel. They have a loud blast of the shofar, and it's heard to proclaim liberty for everybody, freedom, right? Time to go home. And this was the feast of Yom Kippur. So that is so beautiful, because today, when they blow the shofar on Yom Kippur, it's like, it's time to go home. It's time to have everything forgiven and to have reconciliation. So how does that happen? Well, let's continue on. So the Yovel comes from the word that also means a ram or something for transport, is to Yovel. And we know that the ram's horn is what is blown, the shofar. So you see, that's where it gets its name. Now, the sages, Hazal, say that Yovel was mentioned in this particular parashah of Behar 4 times. Well, they relate that to Israel's 3 times of being redeemed from being captives. So that would have been in Egypt, and then by the Assyrians, and then by the Babylonians. And so they're waiting for the 4th redemption, or Geulah means to bring back or return. They're waiting for the 4th redemption, which will be the final Geulah, when the tree of Israel will be properly planted. And they believe that this will happen when the Messiah comes. Well, actually, that tree has already been planted. Its roots have gone deep, and it's beginning to grow into a tree of faith. And now all the nations can benefit from the nourishing sap that comes from those deep roots that go deep, deep, deep where the water is. Okay, so it'll be a tree planted by streams of water. And this is what we're going to see in many of the Psalms and in the book of Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, in Hebrew. And so I'm going to end there today, and I'm going to show you some fun things there. So the rabbis relate the final Jubilee to the prophet's words of Jeremiah 17:8. And here it is. We've all heard it. He will be like a tree near streams of water, who send forth its roots by the what? River. And look, it's the word for a river. Why? Because Jubilee means to bring home or to transport back. So that's the name of a river, because it starts on top of the mountain and it brings it down into a body of water, and then it evaporates, and then it goes back up into the skies, and then it comes down again as rain, and it's that beautiful cycle of the rain. So it's the same word. Yubal is a river in Hebrew. And then it goes on to say it does not notice when drought comes. Okay, so this tree has been planted by God. This is a picture of Israel and you and I. And it says, it doesn't matter what's going on around you. If it's drought, if it's famine, if it's war, if it's wind, that tree is not affected. Why? Because of its root system connected deep in the river. Okay, so it's that living water that sustains the tree no matter what's going on. Okay, it keeps producing, it keeps yielding fruit. Okay, it's not anxious when the things around you are in trouble, or there's problems, or things are difficult. Okay, so the blessing will be that you will be stable and continue to do what your life purpose is in spite of what's going on around you. Now, the tree's need for food and water was unaffected by the heat, winds, famine, I already said to you, because of the river. And I just went into that. Notice in contrast, right after that, in Jeremiah 17:5, it says, "Cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart departs from the living God," from the Lord. It says, "For he will be just the opposite. He will be like a shrub in a desert, and shall not see even good when it does come, but shall inhabit the parched places in the wilderness, in a salt land which is not inhabited. Oh my gosh. Have you ever been to the Qumran caves or to the area of the Negev in southern Israel where the salt lands are? Oh my goodness, nothing grows there. Not a weed, not grass, not trees, nothing. It's just as far as you can see salt land. And so what they're saying is, if you're going to put your trust in yourself or those around you or your government or your money, whatever it is you're trusting in, you're still, when the drought comes and the trouble comes, you are not planted by the source of life. And you'll be alone and you'll be unfulfilled and in wanting. So that's what this whole last couple portions is about. God was first in the beginning of Leviticus talking to the priests, but now he's down to the people and he wants to get personal to them because he wants to bring them in to a new land. And there's lots going on in that land, just like today in our culture. So he's pleading with them, please follow me. Don't depend on yourself. Don't depend on other nations. You see, when Jeremiah wrote this, Israel was contemplating who should they make alliances with in order to come out on top. Should we make alliances with Babylon? Should we make alliances with the Assyrians? Who should we go to? Egypt? Who should we make covenants with? And God's going, no. Trust in me alone, and I'm going to bring you to that promised land. So Jeremiah is echoing that to all the people. Trust in God, not yourself, not in your flesh. So water equaled life. John 4:10, Jesus said to the woman at the well, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water, meaning Jesus was the source of life. Jesus was the one who fulfilled. Jesus was the one to give blessings, which was what? Freedom and release spiritually from bondage. And the bondage is sin and death. So that was what Jesus was saying here. So you can see how you can transfer all of this right into the spiritual realm. So Yeshua also compared his kingdom to planting trees near streams of water. So the roots would be sent forth, there's the word again, and would be strong enough to withstand anything. Someone who trusts in Adonai will be known by their continual production of what? Fruit. At the right season, the right place, the right time. And I always say to people, if you've got good root, you'll produce good shoot and then good fruit. And you'll continue to be productive, even though things around you can be confusing and in turmoil. You just keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep your eyes on your calling. Keep your eyes on your lane. What does he have you doing that he wants you to keep on being faithful to? And that's a word for all of us, right? So the rabbis see the word Yovel, interestingly, in Psalm 149:3, relating, once again, to the Messiah. It says, with the drum and harp, let us make music to him. Here's what it is in Hebrew, that same verse. The year of the Yobel is one of the greatest messianic signs. So they say, we're going to have drum and harp. We're going to be celebrating, relating to the Messiah when he comes. So look, they go, oh, look, that's exactly the Yovel. It's the year of Jubilee. Because you see the first letters in this, let us make music with drum harp to him. It's right here. Okay. See the Bet, Vav, Yod, Lamed. Those are the four letters in the word Yovel. So there it is. That's how the rabbis study the scripture. I think it's beautiful. So in the Jubilee, the slave is released, and that's servant, not slave like we think of, back in the South. These were people that were that were employed, they were provided for, they lived in your home, they helped. They were like servants and helpers. So I hate that they use the word slave. They should say, when your servants are released, because many times these servants worked for you to pay off debts. And so it was a kindness, it was a mercy and a grace to have people working for you, working off their debt. But in the sabbatical year, the 7th year, all debt would be released. And then it would be the same for the Jubilee. So the land would be restored to its rightful owner, and all is at rest. People are like, whew, I'm free now. My debts are forgiven. Wouldn't that be wonderful if everybody could live like that, right? It's time for liberty. So liberty, what's that word? It's the word darar. And I love that. It means to return home. And it shares the same root as door. Here it is, dalet, and then this is the O and the resh. Well, this is dalet, resh, resh. So they just, one of the R's drops off and they put an O in it. And guess what? It means a generation. So it's time for that generation to return home. And it's time for our generation to return home as well. Home to the one who made us, who wants to bless us as a nation. But if we don't want him, he's not going to force himself on us. And if you look back through history, you're going to see the curses and blessings that come when we choose to either follow or not follow. And right away, we go back to the Garden of Eden where we started. And I talked about the 2 seed lines, one who would be the seed of the woman, ultimately the Messiah, and then the seed of the serpent, those that are rebellious and want to go their own way. So we're seeing this ending, blessing and curses, in the end of this middle book of the Torah. So the food, here's how it worked. The food for the 48th year would have to sustain them for the Shemitah, the 49th, and the 50th year. So what God did in that 48th year, in those cycles, would have to last him 2 years. So it required faith in who? In what God would provide prior to that. So the 48th year would be the huge blessing, and they would have to trust God that that would sustain them. Okay, this included the owner of the land as well as the poor among them. And it usually happened only once in a generation. Okay, only one Jubilee in a lifetime. Okay, and there was peace and enough for all. Doesn't that sound like when the Messiah returns? He said he came the first time to die as a suffering servant. The second time he's coming is to set up his kingdom for 1,000 years here on earth. And so that is going to be a time of peace and blessing. However, there is going to be a day when those who turn away will suffer the consequences, and those are the curses of turning away from God. And that's how this book ends. So the verb darar appears in Isaiah 61. That's interesting, in reference to the ministry of the Messiah. So let's look at that word there and see how it shows up. This is what Jesus read when they handed him the scroll in the temple, and he was going to read the Haftarah, and it was in Isaiah 61. So he opened it up, and here's what he read. The Spirit of the Lord God is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to what? Bring good news to the afflicted. He was sending me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty, there it is, darar, to the captives, and freedom to prisoners. Prisoners literally, both literally, physically, and spiritually. Jesus was setting people free from demon possession, from injustice, from bad thinking. He was setting people free to function in their design and purpose. And he said he came to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. This was God's favor, sending Jesus in the flesh as the one who would set all men free. The second time I said is when ultimately we'll see that fulfillment. So the book of Vayikra, or Leviticus, let's look at chapter 25, 20, verse 21 and 20 and 21. if you ask, if we can't sow or harvest in a Jubilee year, what are we going to eat? So these are the people without faith, the grumblers, the complainers. They didn't want to follow God's ways. They just said, oh my gosh, we're looking forward. How's that all going to work if we're not out in the fields bringing in the harvest? Then 21 says, then I will order my blessing on you during the 6th year, so that the land will bring forth enough fruit for the 6th. That would be that one, then the next year, and then that Jubilee year. So ultimately, 3 years, 6th through the 8th. This had to do with the Shemitah as well as that cycle up to 50. So this is what God is saying. Are you going to trust me, or trust the land, or trust your money, or trust your smarts, or the fact that you're a good farmer? What are you going to trust in when God is ultimately in control? So those who were wealthy didn't want to obey the Jubilee. They couldn't wait for the Sabbaths and the Shemitahs to end. The new year began on Rosh Chodesh, the sighting of the new moon, and they could once again then sell their produce. And this is what they wanted. They were worldly minded. All they could think about was money, money, money. And that's exactly where we are today. Those with the power and the purses are those that have the power. So let's look at Amos 8:5. When will the Rosh Chodesh be over, so that we can market our grain, and the Shabbat, so we can sell our wheat? You measure the grain with unequal measures, so you can cheat others. This is what the prophet Amos was saying about those same people that didn't want to trust God. This was because they used price gouging and uneven scales. So see, they didn't want the Sabbath or the Shemitah or the Jubilee, because that meant loss of money and power. And so the prophets were talking about that, the prophet Amos. So look at James 5:4 in the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah. The wages you have fraudulently withheld from the workers are crying out against you. You have led a life of luxury and self-indulgence in a time of slaughter, meaning there's so many needs around us. And are we focusing on ourselves, or are we looking out and saying, Lord, how can I help others with the blessings you've given me? So he calls it a time of slaughter. You have gone on eating for yourself, me first mentality, right? Things today are wrong and unjust. But God sees. Don't think he doesn't see. He sees it all. And with faithful prayer and God's perfect timing, God will again make all things right. And he uses us in his kingdom here on earth now to help bring about that healing of others. And he will redeem the land and the people. And once again, his name will be glorified in his second coming. And I believe today there's a whole generation of people who are hungry. They don't know who they are. The things of this world have not satisfied them. And so they're inventing ways of doing evil to try to fill that void inside. And they're trying to find their own identity. Our identity is all ultimately found in the one who made us, the one who died for us, the one who redeemed us from that life of sin and death in order to be all he wants us to be. But unfortunately, we look around at people around us and we compare ourselves and, I'm not as beautiful, or I'm not as athletic, or I'm not. So, who am I really? The world's not giving me any kudos. So, I guess I'll just be something else. And maybe I'll find satisfaction there. However, I've talked to those same people and they're not satisfied. Matter of fact, one young man who said he was sexually fluid, he ended up sharing with me that he really hated himself and never saw his place among our culture. And that made me so sad. I'll tell you, I had tears in my eyes and I just gave him a huge hug and I said, you have value. God has a purpose for you. Satan wants to rip you off and get you to think that you're not functioning in your design and purpose. So trust in the Lord, trust in the Lord. I have no doubt that my words made some impact in his life. If not now, then perhaps down the road, those words will come back to remind him of who he really is. So if we evaluate our culture, we can compare it to the land that's never given rest. It's being abused, right? Unable to rest. We've overpriced things and overworked things and overvalued things of this world. But what God cares about are the weightier matters. Just like in agriculture, there was a loss of good topsoil, I call it truth, which leads to erosion of the land. That's the same thing that's happening in our culture, socially, morally, spiritually, in every way, is that the land is being overworked and nothing is being restored to its original condition. So it's just this slide downhill. And it's deception and it's apathy among the people. Erosion occurs when we're in California, fire season. They're always looking for the trees with the deep roots that can hold the land together and keep those mudslides from going. Well, that's the same thing spiritually and emotionally. If our roots aren't solid and if we're not producing fruit, then we're going to be swept away in the mud as well. So there's a lot of principles here with soil and water and root systems and trees. So this is how God teaches his kids. He used the things that are seen to teach us principles that are not seen in the spiritual. So now let's look at the second part of this, B'chukotai. What does that mean? Well, it means God's statutes. A hoch is something that God tells you to do and you don't really understand why. You're just asked to obey. This, again, is where trust comes in, because ultimately God is the one who made everything and made us. So he understands the purpose. We may not see it initially, but I've walked with him for 50 years. And I always said, Lord, I don't care if it takes 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. I want to see my finish line in every area of my life, in my personal life, in my marriage, as a mother, as a friend. So, Lord, I just want to finish well. I want to finish strong, not without bruises and bumps and scars to prove it, but I will finish strong. I believe that. Why? Because I hang on to him. He is my source of strength in this crazy world. So I hope you will be encouraged today. So here's the hoch. It's hocha. It means to draw or portray, to engrave or inscribe. In other words, it's something that will last. I love that. Engrave or inscribe. You can dig up things thousands of years old, and what will be on them? Inscriptions. They're meant to last. And so these laws are meant to be something that if you do them, you'll have lasting consequences that are positive. Okay, so this wasn't the same as a mitzvah, which was a command or a judgment. A shafat is a judgment. These laws were in the Torah, and they had to do with moral law, civil law, dietary, ritual law, holiness law, agriculture, criminal law, blasphemy, spiritual law, sacrificial law, contamination laws, purification laws. I think we should just subtitle it the good luck laws. In other words, good luck keeping all those. If you think you're living Torah, good luck. If you break one of those, you're not living Torah. So that's the point, is that no one can perfectly live this life that God was pointing to as his standard. No one except Jesus. He was the only one that ever walked this earth that could do that. So the laws were given because of man's heart condition. Okay, so a medication is developed based on a need for this disease to be cured, right? So God was giving all these hukot, these laws, in order, like a medicine for what was already going on in man's heart and in the pagan nations around them. So it was added because of man's behavior until the coming of the seed about whom the promise was made. This is Galatians 3:19 in the New Testament. The promise was made to Abraham 430 years earlier than this story. So it hasn't changed. It's based on a promise, and God can't break his promise. So how did Abraham get declared righteous? By believing in what God said. How do we be declared righteous? By believing in what Jesus said. I am the way, not a way, the truth, not a truth, the life, not just any life. So Jesus was here to show us that he was the promised seed. And we talked about that in the very first book of Genesis, didn't we? And so you see here, Galatians echoes that same thing. He says the law was given until the seed comes. And now that the seed is here, we don't need those laws, even though they were holy, righteous, and good. No one could keep them. And so now we function in righteousness in his kingdom, and we walk by the spirit of the law, not the law. You see this? See the difference there? So if you want to keep the feast days, if you want to keep a Sabbath day, that is beautiful. And we're supposed to have a day of rest. This is how God wants us to live. So anyway, that's a controversial subject. There's a lot of things I could say right now, but I'm not going to stay on that hill right now. And now we're justified by the promise of the one who could fulfill those laws, and that was Jesus. So man's righteousness would be obtained by the conclusion or the end of the law. Or to say it another way, when the Messiah appeared as the ultimate goal or fulfillment of those demands of the law, then we enter the kingdom and are declared righteous, not by keeping external laws of the Torah, but by the righteousness obtained for us by the Messiah. It's his Holy Spirit in us now that leads us in the same paths of righteousness for his name's sake. You see, that's Psalm 23. He leads me in paths of righteousness. Well, the law was those paths, but no one could keep them. Okay, so now we walk in paths of righteousness and we follow the Spirit that lives in us. This is the temple now, and we walk by faith in the one who saved us, which is Jesus. So once you've reached that goal, right, you're at the end of the race for righteousness. So, right, you finished the race. All of the laws of racing still remain in place, even though you've reached your finish line, right? The end. So Christ is the end of the law. In other words, the fulfillment of all that. So Messiah is the goal, the goal line for obtaining righteousness or victory. And it's because of his work, not ours, that we're justified as victorious when we cross our finish line. So we are no longer under the curse of the Torah, which means no one can keep it. There's a curse there. We aren't under the punishment or a condemnation that the law demanded. We've been set free. It's a Jubilee. So following Jesus is like a Shemitah or a Jubilee where all is forgiven and we go home. Home to the one who loves us, and home to the one who wants to bless us, even in the midst of trials and troubles. So Yeshua freed us from that curse of the law by becoming the curse for us, and that's Galatians 3:13. So Israel ignored the Shemitahs of letting the land rest, and that 10 cycles of 7 years, ended up being 70 years that they didn't obey God. And guess how long they went into exile in Babylon? 70 years. Okay. So it was like 1 year for all of those 70 that they didn't practice this cycle. So God warned his bride about falling away, trusting in yourself. It's a gradual process, and it leads to, just like the one in Jeremiah 17, where it says, you'll be like in a salt land, you'll be alone, there'll be dryness, compromise, illness, loneliness, wrong choices, and often major choices that affect the rest of your life. Oh my goodness. I know as a woman who in her 20s was was very promiscuous and left me infertile, that there was severe consequences to my behavior. And yes, I was saved. And yes, I love Jesus. And yes, I've been following him and teaching and preaching and have led hundreds of people to Jesus. However, the consequences were lifelong. And although he blessed me and gave me two wonderful adopted sons, my Eric and Stephen, it came with consequences. And so when we trust in ourselves to fulfill that longing, I was looking for love in all the wrong places and faces. And when we look to ourselves or to other people to try to fill that void there, it's going to leave you in a position where the blessing that might have been is not realized. So Israel's obedience could have been different if they had obeyed and listened. They could have had peace and they would not have been taken into exile. But God will use discipline on his people in order to get them to turn back to him. And that's exactly what happened when they came out of Babylon. Ezra the scribe rewrote the Torah, and the temple was rebuilt, and the people repented, and there was blessing that followed that, but not without the 70 years of suffering. So that's a message for all of us today. So Psalm 17:8, I like what it says. It says, keep me as the apple of your eye. What does that mean? It means face-to-face intimacy, as if everything God says, you hang on every word. Do you remember when you first started dating somebody you really loved, and everything they said, you gave them their full attention, and oh yes, I agree 100%. Oh, I can't wait to be with you. I can't wait to see you. Can't wait to listen to all your heart's desires and blah, 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 right? So when we love Jesus, we have eye-to-eye intimacy, and we say, now what, Lord? Show me what to do today. I walked into the gym this morning with a friend who's a Christian, and we both started praying as we walked into the gym. Lord, who needs you today? Who can I encourage? Who can send someone to me, Lord, who needs you today? And that's our prayer every time we go out and leave our house, right? The rabbis call this apple of your eye, ishon bat ayin. That's the saying in Hebrew. And it says it's when we keep our eyes on him that we are the little man of the eye. In other words, our reflection shows up in Jesus' eyes, in the pupil of his eye. And so they call that the little man of the eye, or the apple of his eye, because the pupil is the apple. So David was saying, may I focus on God for my power, my provision, and approval. And that is the heart of David, who wrote Psalm 17. He says, keep me in that place where it's only you. Just put blinders on around me to anything that I think can sustain me or give me help in time of trouble other than you. And that was David's heart cry as well. Look at Romans 12:2 in the New Testament. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed, metamorphosis, by the renewing of your mind. And also it talks about that in Titus 3:5, regeneration, right? You need that born again heart from above. And then God begins to change our minds. And we're transformed as we grow spiritually. So this wasn't an improvement program or try to be more positive or be a better you or more enlightened, but you have to be a new creation, a new you. You have to be totally changed. I have to die to self in order to live for his will. And that's the transformation, right? So this regeneration involves a conforming, I want to change that here, conforming to God's will so that we impact those around us. And this takes place so that what is good and satisfying and successful in God's eyes will be what we look for. And that calling is for us to serve him in that way. That is what it means to be a Christian. So we need to ask God, Lord, what would please you today? When you get up in the morning, Lord, there's a lot going on around me. I've got all these concerns and worries, and the world seems like it's going crazy and it's upside down, and wrong is right and right is wrong, and up is down and down is up. Our transformation is based on faith that comes as a gift of grace. As we turn to him and we just say, Lord, I don't get it. Lord, I don't know what. Lord, show me the next step. You follow somebody step by step. You don't have to know what's around the next corner. Just follow step by step. And each of us has a different role and a different purpose, right? But we're all part of the same body of believers. And that's how they use that analogy in the New Testament, that the body has many parts. Not everybody's a mouth. Not everybody is a filter system like your kidneys or your liver. Not everybody is a hand. Okay. And so to be healthy as a whole body, we have to identify with him and function in our design and purpose. That's the real Jubilee. Go home, function in your design and God-given purpose. Oh my goodness. I wish I could get on a mountaintop and just shout that. So we're all given gifts. Now, I hope you know your spiritual gift and you begin to function in that. And I've listed some of the gifts here. And be cheerful in this gifting because they're from God. Okay. So this is a demonstration of how much we love him when what we do is in his name and for his sake and for his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. Oh my goodness, Lord, help us in this time, right? So don't let love just as an outward showing so that people can say, oh, isn't Rebecca wonderful? Look all she's doing. No, it's detest what is evil, cling to what is good. This is the recipe. Don't be lazy when hard work is needed. Serve the Lord with a spiritual fervor. In other words, be consistent. Study, grow, read your word, grow in your faith. Okay, rejoice in hope. In other words, when other people are successful, we should rejoice with them, not wish them harm so that we can look better. Boy, is that's so tempting to do, isn't it, when you look at things going on around us? So it says, rejoice in your hope, be patient in afflictions, and what? Steadfast in prayer. I think that's the one area that all of us can admit we need more of, more self-discipline. I know I do. So bless those who persecute us. Be sensitive to the needs of others. Show proper respect and brotherly love. If possible, live at peace with everyone and don't take revenge. Don't be overcome by the evil around you, but overcome evil, brokenness with good. Okay, so when somebody does something against you, return good to them and bless them and pray for them. It's hard to hate people that you spend time praying for. So these are just the ways that I'm encouraging my own heart as well to be steadfast in all these areas. And that is how we're to walk out the Torah. So studying the Torah and the New Testament means that I'm gazing into my lover's eyes every day, seeing him for all he's worth. And it's there that I find my strength, my worth, and my song. He's the one who has established me by the rivers of living water. And no one can unroot me. The Bible says no one can snatch you from my hand. So if you are rooted in Jesus and you're feeling stressed and concerned about things around you, keep your eyes on him, realize who you are, who your identity is, and ask God to, Lord, what would satisfy you today? What can I do to take my eyes off myself, my kids, my husband, whatever, and let me just do your work. That's why I'm here. So here's how you end every book of Torah. I say, Mazel Tov, congratulations, Havarim, friends in Hebrew. We've completed the third book of the Torah, the one that a lot of Gentile Christians can't wait to read through real quick. It's been a blessing. I hope you've learned things. So here's what they say when you finish a book of Torah. Hazak Hazak, Venit Hazak. It means be strong, and may you be strengthened. Wow, that's a great way to end, isn't it? So today, if you're feeling discouraged or you're feeling fearful, I talked to a group of women at a Bible study yesterday, and I went around the table and I said, what are you all afraid of? Name one thing. And practically all of them was the condition of the world around them. And so today, if your heart is fearful or anxious, I just pray that you would step into that rest that He wants you to have today, and that you'll realize that He's right there. If we trust in Him, His promises are true. Doesn't mean we won't have trials or difficulty, but our roots will go deep because of who we are in Him. So be encouraged today, church, and God bless you, and I'll see you next time on Sparky's Torah Time. Don't forget to share with your friends and family. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.